Hello, this is Art Edwards. This is my fourth podcast. It's called Art Edwards Appears Large. At this point, we've focused on musicians. I've had three musicians come in, people I've known. We're venturing off a little bit from that now. Anybody who's known me for 15 minutes knows that I like to write novels about rock musicians. And I was contacted, a few months ago by someone who had one coming out. I was flattered. He wanted to know if I'd do a review, and I said, well, of course I would. I read it and went, you know what? This deserves something more than a review. This deserves a conversation with the author. So today I have on the program Aug Stone, and we're going to talk about his book today. Say hello, Aug.
Hey, everybody.
So I got the book a while ago, and I want to put it up here so everybody knows what it looks like. 'Cause there's some great art on top of it as well. It's called The Ballad of Buttery Cake Ass. That's right. When you name something the Ballad of Buttery Cake Ass, you know that you have a lot to live up to, right? So we're going to talk a lot about the novel. We're going to talk about Og, what got him here, where he's going from here, what he likes to do, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to jump in, and I'm going to read the blurb because somebody went through the effort to sort of encapsulate what the book is about, and it's a good blurb for having read the book. So, um, two music obsessive, obsessive embark on a hilarious quest to track down Buttery Cake Ass's live in Hungary album, as legendary as it is obscure. Their pursuit of one of the greatest bands ever known takes them down ever unknown takes them down many a bizarre path teeming with grand ideas and grander egos in this ode to record shopping and what it's like to be in your first band. And then whenever I hear that, what it's like to be in your first band, I hearken back to sort of my first bands and the magical times that have happened when playing in bands. And I'm really fascinated right now in the idea of bands having sort of a magical time, and then there's sort of the time that they're marketing the band, and it becomes kind of something else, this driven thing to sort of disseminate the music. And I just wanted to talk to you about the concept of magic and how that relates to um, the book and those magical times that you were in a band, and maybe you could talk about some of your early bands that come to mind.
Yeah, that's a good question. I love the association of music and magic because to me it is this magical thing that just comes from somewhere else and just sweeps you up within itself. And my first band, my first real band, I had a couple bands in high school, and the one my senior year of high school was called Plan 9 from Outer Space, named after the movie. Our bass player was a huge horror movie fan, really into the Misfits, all that stuff. It was really cool because on the book tour, I just was at Plan 9 Music in Richmond, Virginia, which is an amazing record shop. So it was a really cool coincidence there. And then we kind of morphed into a band called In Between. Like we played together at the very end, right before we were all going off to college, very end of that summer. Then we all got together again that Christmas and then just really went for it. And the magic is like we were all, I mean, we were just, vociferous, I think is the word I'm looking for, like consuming music, like whatever we get our hands on. Like the Trouser Press record guide was like my Bible when I was a teenager, and I'd scan it daily, look, adding to my list of bands that I just needed to hear. Um, and, we'd listen to all the college stations, and Julian Cope had just released the Krautrock sampler, and I was getting all that stuff that I could find. I mean, this was 1994, 1995, so it was pre-internet for us. We weren't on it just yet, so we had to go search this out physically. And like when we would get together and play, like all our influences like were somehow in it. Like we were really big. We just got into Joy Division and New Order about a year, like end of junior year of high school. Obviously, the Misfits and the Ramones were big. All the krautrock stuff, Neu, Faust. Yeah, and like we grew up listening to heavy metal, in the late '80s because that was what was available to us in suburban America back then. Um, and like whew, Julian Cope. I'm trying to look at my CD collection, and I love like Miles Davis's Electric Period. Um, and all these would sort of come together when we would just play. And this was never recorded or anything, and we never did this live. Like never occurred to us that we could just improvise live. Although we were like huge jazz fans, um, when the idea of playing a show came up, we kind of panicked. We're like, oh, we got to write some songs, and we wrote like all these 2 minute like Misfits Ramones songs. Um, so in the book, part of the book is like me thinking back to that, how like just how much goes into it when you're young and you're trying to figure things out. And like I wish that stuff had been recorded, because it was this magic. I remember it being magic. I mean, maybe it's best it didn't get recorded. It could have been terrible, but in my mind it was the music I had been wanting to hear for years. So yeah, there's always a magic in the room, and it's so just a wonderful feeling to get together with people. When that happens, it's one of the best feelings in the world.
For sure, for sure. It's interesting. I'm remembering like an early band, and we played a gig, uh, like our first originals gig, and we like wrote a song in the parking lot before we went in. It was I was a
Nice,
bass player, and I had this
excellent.
bass line, and Bobby brought this giant shaky gourd thing, and I had this, I was flea and all that, and so I had this slap bass line I was really proud of, and so he brought up the shaky gourd, and we had a drummer, and we were a trio, so he played the shaky gourd, I played the bass, and literally like, I think we'll play this tonight. Whereas, I've been in bands since then. That was easily the like least intimidated I ever was to do something like that. I mean, I was in a band for 5 years where we never once deviated. It was very Ramones. It's like, this is the way the song goes. These are the notes you play in this place, and then you're done, and then you play the next song the same way. So it's really interesting that you guys had kind of had the courage.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I was gonna say that with you. I mean, that takes balls to write something in the parking lot and then just go in and play it. Like, and I think as you get older, you kind of become aware of just how insane that kind of seems. Like that you're going to do something completely unrehearsed, and like people are going to listen to it.
Sure. Well, there was some alcohol involved, and all of that. So, it was, there was
No,
some liquid
that
courage,
always helps.
no doubt. But um, yeah, and those really are magical times. And you were really out there, and you were like, I remember being in the dressing room, and there was a fire hose sticker in the dressing room, and I was like, did fire hose play here? Am I playing on the same stage that Mike Watt played on? This is unbelievable. So
Yeah.
you're so far above your head at that point that it's like you need a couple of drinks, and you're willing to try anything, because you're so far above your head at that, what could possibly go wrong that wasn't going to go wrong anyway, I guess, is what I mean. So
I love that you brought that up. I completely forgot about it. That was totally a thing when I'd be on stages that I had seen bands play at, like a year or so before when I was, first started going to shows. It was so exciting.
right, right. What part of the country are you from? Tell us about what clubs you might go to when you were a little younger.
I grew up in Connecticut, and I would go to Toad's Place and the Tune In New Haven. Um, those were great. And then I moved to Boston to go to school, and like Boston in the mid '90s was great. Just it's such a it's not a big college town, but there bands come through all the time. Um, like the Rat, when the Rat was there, that was super exciting, and the history at the Rat too. I mean, like all the punk bands played. The Police played there, which still blows my mind. I like their first American tour. Yeah, the Middle East and like the Local 186, which is gone.
You went to high school in Connecticut. You played in bands. You were jazz improvisational as a band, and were brokenhearted that you had to write songs to get a gig. Um,
Oh, we weren't brokenhearted. We were super psyched.
okay, okay. Well, good. Well, that's good. Were you a songwriter? Were you a songwriter in the band?
Yeah, yeah. And that's how we learned. We were just throwing together songs. 1, 4, 5, and whatever we could come up with. But that was a very important step. Like having to write the songs. It got us going.
Right. Cool. And are you still a songwriter?
Oh yeah, totally. I write much better songs now.
Right. We all hope. I'm also still a songwriter, um, so I want to talk about the book a little bit. Um, there's something I really relate to it because I just finished a novel called 19 Ways to Destroy Your Rock Band, and it was the first novel where I said just. So it was the first novel where I woke up every morning and said just be funny. Everybody likes funny, right? Um, so so I felt kind of a kinship with your work from the time I started reading it, and I found it humorous, and I was laughing, and then I just I really related to the effort to make a novel funny, and I want to talk to you about what went into that for you. What was your process like? If do you have to tell yourself to be funny, or do you just wake up that way?
Well, I mean, it was the whole idea is so ridiculous. A band called Buttery Cake Ass. There were a couple times I had it like I was maybe felt I was getting a little too serious. I wanted to rope it back in because there were always jokes to be made, and you could joke about the very real, sort of devastating stuff you you go through with bands, like gigs that no one shows up at. I felt it more in line with the book to make that funny than depressing. But I do a comedy character called Young Southpaw, and he's like this absurdist surrealist. He just goes on these stream of consciousness rants, taking in all sorts of pop culture, mostly music. There's like 63 stories on the podcast now. Just ridiculous stuff like uh, what if Gilligan's Island had been a musical, and instead of Bob Denver you could have John Denver, Ginger Spice for Ginger, and Professor Griff from Public Enemy, and obviously for Thurston Howell III, Thurston Moore. So originally the novel was done as Young Southpaw. I wrote the whole first draft in the voice I usually do, and I kept like that tone, but I really reeled it back in because Southpaw just digresses and digresses and digresses. And in the book, I know it digresses and digresses and digresses, but I reined that in a lot from where it originally was to make it more um, focused, I guess. So it was conceived as just this sort of absurdist comedic rant. But then when butter cake has really happened to me, like that the moment the impetus for the story really happened, and the stuff in the epilogue about going to see Fugazi was another real life story, and I wanted to keep it as it's funny to say as true to my life as I could, with it being called the Ballad of Buttery Cake Ass. I was shocked at how much of my real life went into it, but yeah, that was the thing, to sort of make it.
Well, it's really interesting. I want to know this level of fiction, and forgive me if a lot of this interview is going to be. This is the way I did it. Do you do it that way too? There's a lot of that kind of relationship that I feel in reading your work, and so the level of fiction versus nonfiction. Have you written fiction that's more fictional than this, and have you written fiction that's less fictional? Have you considered memoir for your band experiences? What's the relationship of this book to those things?
Well, I've written two previous books. The first one was called Off License to Kill, which was the most ridiculous idea I ever had, so I knew I had to do it. I loved the James Bond books growing up. My grandmother gave me all the cool 60s paperbacks with the awesome covers that she had when they came out, and I read them. And I mean, he's a lot more realistic than he is in those films. I really love the books, and I moved to London in 2003 to do some recording, and I started rereading them. And I don't drink anymore. um, I haven't had a drink in about 10 years. It just stopped being fun, which was really weird. Like I was getting like 3-day hangovers. And I was like, I never expected this to happen, but probably a good idea if I just stop. Um, but that first few months in London back then, when I still was drinking, that took things up several notches, even from like where I was already drinking quite heavily. And then when I got back, I was continuing to read the Bond books, and I was reflecting on the awesome time I just had being in my favorite city in the world. And I came up with the idea of James Vagabond of the British Drunken Secret Service. And this stuck with me, and I was like, that's so ridiculous. I got to do it. I was like, what could I have him do? And so after a couple of days, it dawned on me I could have him go back in time to stop prohibition from ever happening. And it was a lot of fun to write. Like I banged out the first draft in like 5 weeks, just coming home from work and just writing every night, like not doing much else. And then I revised it a few more times. And then when I stopped drinking about 10 years ago, I revised it one more time, and because I realized that you could self-publish now. You could just put stuff out as an ebook, and that was the original goal. I did eventually put it out as a paperback as well, but um, that was, again, I mean, it was very exaggerated, but there was some real life stuff in there. It was kind of like an ode to my drinking days because they were a lot of fun. Um, and it was started off as a James Bond parody, became like its completely own thing. Um, but then I have written a memoir as well. My last book was called Nick Cave's Bar, which, and this ties into Buttery Cake Ass in the fact that it's an absurd quest, but this happened to me in real life. And I think there's just something about my fate that going on these insane quests, like that's what's being given to me. In 1998, I was backpacking around Europe with a friend of mine after college. And in Barcelona, I met this woman at the hostel. And we were just hanging out that one night. Everybody went down to the beach. And at one point I said, Katie, do you like Nick Cave? And she said, man, I'm Australian. I love Nick Cave. He owns a bar in Berlin. I always meant to go when I lived there, but I never got around to it. And like still 1998, I wasn't on the internet then. I went back to Allston, Massachusetts, where I was living, told my best friend Andy, and armed with only this information, because we didn't do any further research whatsoever, we booked a trip from Boston to Berlin to try and find it. And we thought we'd get off the plane and be like, where's Nick Cave's bar? Someone would say, oh, it's over there. And we'd go have the best 10 days of our lives. But no one had any idea what we were talking about. And it was just like 10 days of drunken misery and confusion. But like a hell of a lot of fun to look back on like 20 years later when I wrote it. And we did find out like around, 20 years after the fact that Nick Cave definitively has never owned a bar anywhere. So yeah, that's pure memoir, but it seemed absurd to people who have read it, but we did do that.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting the ideas that you've had, the James Bond idea, which seems like really fictional, the Nick Cave's bar, which is absolutely nonfiction memoir, and this maybe straddles the fence a little bit. You've got clearly some autobiographical stuff in it. You've also, clearly stuff that couldn't happen almost. It's so made up. So
Yeah.
I just find I find this kind of conversation fascinating because nobody tells you that. It's like there's fiction and there's fiction. Um, there's memoir, there's memoir, and then there's nonfiction. There's all these. It's a continuum of stuff that's going on. Um, so I was curious if you've sort of dove into other aspects and ways, because I certainly have, and I'm at like the 25-year point with writing about musicians. So I've spanned the entire continuum at this point. But
Yeah, I was just about to ask, like, how much of your stuff is exaggerated?
yeah, I started in the middle, where it was like anybody who knows like any of my past could point to this character and say, well, that's A, and this is B, and you're C, and this represents this thing that happened. So it was kind of in the middle, but there was no effort to take a scene that actually happened in real life and put it in the book. It was sort of taking these characters with different names and creating a new story, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and then I did that for two. It's okay. I did that for two novels. This sort of mid-fiction stuff, very domestic realism. I love John Updike, despite all the rock and roll stuff. I loved kind of domestic realism as fiction. Um, and then the third one, I said, okay, I got to get away from this. I've got to write about characters who are not me. So I went from a bass player to a guitar player, which was this huge jump. Um, and
Yeah.
and
Two
so
whole strings.
exactly, yeah, so they're really complex character here. So so I did that for a novel, and then my most recent one started as a memoir where I was writing about my time and my most in the band that I'm most known for, and eventually just found the memoir just too bleh or sad or something. So I changed it and fictionalized it, and that's when I started to say be funny, and that be so that one
Yeah.
is obviously closest to like a memoir. So yeah, I'm running the gamut. It's all basically fiction at this point, but there's the level of me that's in each one is um, so
What I was gonna say is it's odd. Like in 2019, I started I started doing the young Southpaw character at the end of 2018, living my New Year's resolution. I don't usually make New Year's resolutions, but that year I made one that I really wanted to try stand up comedy once because I'd been thinking about it for years. And then I did the Southpaw character live, and it was like the best feeling getting laughs that first time. And I just kept doing it. In 2019, I did 167 sets, I think. I really wanted to hit 200. I remember really trying. Um, but occasionally I would get up and just tell my own story, like real life stories. And people didn't believe them. And they're like, well, you should change that bit about this. And I was like, but no, that's what actually happened. And they're like, it's just not believable. I was like, man.
So the comedy thing's really interesting to me. What who are your influences? What prompted you to want to try it?
I mean, Monty Python, I've been telling this story on the tour. The first, my older cousins were always into Monty Python, but they never really shared that with me. I just kind of knew it. So one day I saw the Flying Circus video at the library, and we took it out, me and my best friend Brian, who, the book is dedicated to, who was the one who asked for Buttery cake gas that day. We um, we got the Flying Circus out of the library, and we're watching the skit where Graham Chapman has the huge prosthetic nose, and he goes to see John Cleese, who's going to remove it. And John Cleese says, "Well, Mr. Luxury Yacht," and Graham Chapman says, "Well, it's spelt luxury yacht, but pronounced throat warbler mangrove." And just something inside me resonated so deeply with that absurdity. I just loved it. Kids in the Hall were a big influence back then. Again, Bry got me into them. Um, Comedians I really like. I love Daniel Kitson. Do you know him? He's a British comedian. He's done stuff sporadically over here, but he focused over in London. His stuff is amazing. He's an excellent storyteller. Okay. Eugene Merman, I really love his stuff. Yeah, tending toward the more absurd.
Right. I remember the thing about Monty Python that was so strange and wonderful to me was I don't know how you go to somebody and explain to them this is what we're going to do and please give us money to do that. It seems so
Yeah.
out there and so wonderful. And then somebody said, "Well, George Harrison funded them." I'm like, "Oh, okay, now I get it." Um, somebody with just a bunch of money and would hear a crazy idea and go, "Well, of course, here. How much do you need? Here's a little more." So um, yeah, the absurdity was very important to me as well. Kids in the Hall, same thing. It really kind of a vital weird thing that was on late at night when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to have to stay up till like 1 in the morning on Friday nights.
What was the deal? Was it on HBO or what?
It was on HBO,
You were
yeah. I think at midnight on Friday.
right. Yeah, so I remember it was late and I was, but I would stay up.
That was the thing back then. It was like Fridays we watch Kids in the Hall at midnight. Before that, on Saturdays it would be Headbangers Ball on MTV till 3 in the morning. But then on Sundays was 120 minutes. So it's always just staying up really late to get music and comedy.
Sure. Well, something that our Art Edwards Appears Large really values is people admitting their most embarrassing influence. Um, so I don't want you to have to go without me going, but I would really like to know your most embarrassing influence, especially the younger the better. Um, uh, for me, uh, there's some Kenny Rogers was a big deal when I was about 8. Um,
When Footloose came out, that was huge.
oh, you're thinking Kenny Loggins? No, 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 my friend.
Kenny Rogers.
Kenny
Oh yeah.
Rogers.
I to listeners, I'm very tired. I just got back from tour very late last night. So, oh god, yeah.
Yeah. No,
Kenny Rogers. Okay.
Kenny Loggins is like Picasso compared to Kenny Rogers. But yeah, so Kenny Rogers was a big deal. ABBA was a huge deal when I was a kid. My first album I ever bought was The Village People. So come on. Um, but anyway, yeah. So are you willing and able to offer an embarrassing influence for the people?
I I don't know what I would be embarrassed of. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to talk about all that stuff. My first record was Twisted Sister's "Stay Hungry." First record I bought with my own money. It was 3.98 Graf Wadman. And do you know who that album is dedicated to? This might be embarrassing that I know this much about it, but "Stay Hungry" by Twisted Sister is dedicated to Arnold Schwarzenegger,
What?
and that comes from obsessively reading liner notes. Yeah, yep.
Wow. I wonder why that would be. Hmm. Did they just love his movies, or was it more like, okay, yeah, no, that's great. That's great. We just love his movies. That's awesome. And considering like where he was when we were kids, I mean, I was a big Conan the Barbarian guy at 12 years old. I was like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. And then he goes on to be governor, and and is still out there, and every once in a while you see him. And
Yeah, when that record came out, he was a bodybuilder and Conan, and he had just started doing his film career, so it wasn't like yeah, like 1984. He hadn't done everything after, it was very early on. But yeah, I guess it's a bit embarrassing but that was something I wanted to have come across in the book too. Is this like how fascinating, especially 12-inch record sleeves would be, and you would just read. If you were that type of person, you would read everything and like be fascinated by what was contained in the liner notes and the lyrics and in the cover art, and how cover art would be a huge indication of like you wanting to buy something. You'd see something and be just like, oh, I gotta. What does this sound like? I gotta know. And then you pay for it, fork over your hard-earned money.
right, right. No, no, Twisted Sisters. That's a sweet spot for me too. I was a little bit. I'm getting the impression I'm a little bit older than you, because I was more of a Quiet Riot guy. There was a
Okay.
nice pocket, like that was kind of my first post Van Halen band where I was like, oh, these guys.
Probably dedicated the book to. He loved Quiet Riot more so than I did, but I mean, I had the first three albums. He did as well. Their covers of the Slade songs are amazing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, no, yeah, it was a kind of a special record, that record. And there was kind of a Quiet Riot v Def Leppard feud going on that was interesting, and I love Def Leppard too.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so very special time, like waiting at the mall record shop with the Quiet Riot record, waiting for Quiet Riot to get there, and being like way back in line, like four businesses down in the mall with your record because the line's so long. They kind of had like a Beatles 3 months where they were really really popular where I was from. So
Oh, so you got
anyway,
them to sign it and everything?
yeah, I did. I went through the line, and got Rudy. I was a bass player. I was just becoming a bass player. I was 14 years old, and got Rudy Sarzo to sign. He was a very impressive guy when you see him on stage. He kind of
Oh
had
yeah.
this weird way of kind of weird stage presence that I just was really enamored by. We all were. All my friends were too. We thought he was the coolest thing that ever happened. So
I mean, he played with Quiet Riot and Ozzy.
right, right, and then moved on to the White Snake.
Oh yeah.
I think he wrote a book too. If anybody's
I
interested, Rudy Sarzo has a memoir.
I heard about that. Yeah.
maybe just maybe just me and you, but just so you know, it's out there. Want
I
to
know
want to
one other guy
want to
who
do
told me
some
about it. So,
promotion for Rudy. Right, right. So
so
there's just this group of people. There's still 15 of us out here.
So I've never really been to a site like that. Didn't really happen in Connecticut. We were just kind of too small, I guess, for people to come through like that. I mean, that would obviously happen in New York and Boston, and bands could just drive through Connecticut
Mm.
on their way to the other one, like in 2 hours. So like, I've been talking about this too. Like it was very special when bands would take the time to stop and play a show in between those 2 dates. But yeah, I don't remember any signings happening when I was growing up. I would have gone to them all probably. I was.
Right. Well, there must have been for you a band that all of a sudden, as kind of immature folk might be. I'm putting this on you, and tell me if I'm completely wrong. Um, where all of a sudden the Twisted Sister records don't matter anymore because now you're into X. What was X for you? What was that band that kind of switched things and you liked a different mode of rock and roll?
There's been a couple times that's happened. Um, it kind of went like Twisted Sister Van Halen to Iron Maiden when I was in junior high, and then I heard the Smiths when I was in 8th grade, like right before high school. But I was still kind of listening to everything. And then I guess when I got into the Jesus and Mary chain, I kind of stopped listening to metal. And I still went to see a couple metal shows. Like I remember I saw White Zombie opening for Testament at Toad's Place, which is, a club in New Haven. And I had no idea they would get so huge. But like my good friends were really into metal, and I liked it too. But yeah, definitely when I got into the Mary chain, I just kind of stopped listening to all that. And then I really got into like synth pop from New Order. Then like in my early 20s, I started getting really into like Depeche Mode and the Pet Shop Boys and really exploring further. And I didn't listen to, I remember like hearing Van Halen during that time and be like, oh yeah, I love this. I freaking love this. And like, pulling all those records out again. But I was actually just thinking about this today because I'm guided by voices. So I'm wearing this shirt. Or one of my favorite bands of all time. And like, in college, I saw them a bunch. I loved them. I bought all the records. And then after I started listening to Depeche Mode a bit more and stuff, I didn't. I just wondered why I didn't buy the GBV albums that came out like in the late '90s until a bit later. And I'm listening to the Robert Pollard biography audiobook right now, and it dawned on me that I had heard that song "Hold On Hope," the one he absolutely hates, that he said because it's so radio friendly, and he had a big thing with the record company about it. I had heard that, I guess, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to bother with a new record. So yeah, little things like that. It's progressively jumped through, but I mean, I'm not sure there's anything. I'm not sure that would happen again. Like right now, I kind of listen to everything.
Good, good, because you're an adult now and you don't have
Yeah,
to choose. Good, yeah, I'm the
yeah.
same way. Um, yeah, the guided by voices bass player, I want to say wrote a novel, maybe a music influenced novel.
Really?
It's been 15 years ago now, but
Which one?
I'm gonna find that out. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not very astute.
Because Jim Greer wrote the history.
Okay. Yeah, no, it had to be a work of fiction. I was pretty much reading. There was a point where I was reading anything I could read about like rock musicians in fiction. So it had to be that. And I remember it was a guided by voices guy. I'm going to find out and I will let you know.
Yeah, please. I'll get on that straight away.
It's kind of a good transition. I want to know if you've been influenced in particular by fiction about musicians, if there's any novel that you thought particularly nailed it for you, or more than one novel. Are there any sort of touchstones that you go back to read like that, or is it more I'm just doing my thing and that's it?
I'm trying to think of what fiction there is about musicians. John Andrew Fredrick, do you know him from the Black Watch? He wrote a very good book called the King of Good Intentions about fictionalized band life in LA. I like that a lot. As far as influences, I can't really think any. For me, it's more comedy novels. Like Eric Idle wrote a book called Hello Sailor in the early '70s, I think, that I just think is hilarious. And it's funny, like he's talked about this on Twitter before. I was psyched when he actually like responded to something I said about it on Twitter. Then we kind of other people started chiming in about how much they liked it. Um, and that book is important for me because in thinking of when I was writing this, because I remember every page was funny. Like there's always something. There's always jokes on every page. And Steve Aylett's Lint. If you don't know, do you know Steve Aylett? He's a British writer. Very unique stuff. But Lint is one.
I know it's okay. It rings a bell, but go ahead.
Okay, Lint is one of the funniest books I've ever read too. Jeff Lint was a failed sci-fi writer, and I mean, this is fictional. But Aylett tells the story of his life about how he never got published until he started sending manuscripts into publishers under the name Isaac Asimov, and yeah, all just stuff like that. So like when I was writing this, it was like we were talking about at the beginning. It was those two books were huge to remind me that keep it funny. You can make it funny on every page. Yeah.
Right, right. I was a big Jonathan Kennedy Toole, a Confederacy of Dunces. That was a big deal. Um,
Yeah.
and the reason that I am a novelist, stand before you as a novelist today, is Kurt Vonnegut, where I went from reading more or less like
Yeah.
Hammer of the Gods by Led Zeppelin, and moved on to, and Sports Illustrated, and eventually after Slaughterhouse-5, I was like, okay, this guy is more rock and roll than anything that I've ever read. So, um, humor was a big deal, and any time I could find something like Joseph Heller, something like that, anytime I could find something that was like kind of more literary, but also like really funny too and shticky and all of that, um, that I could relate to, like a Saturday Night Live skit or something like that. It was that was always a magical moment for me. So, um, I the thing that I think when people read your book that they'll enjoy the most is the humor, and I and there's very much a narrative. This isn't somebody who's just ranting and has printed it off and created a book. There's also a structure of where the book's going.
Thank
It,
you.
it starts with two obsessed record kids, and they go in search of this album. So you have this great framework. You're on the search. We know what they want. We're right there with them. We love music. They love music. We've all searched for this rock and roll thing in our lives, and have followed through with it. Um, and the record that they're looking for is called Live in a Hungaria, which makes no sense. Um, and it especially makes no sense. And I don't want to spoil anything about the novel, but the one thing I do want to say is Live in Hungaria, and forgive me if I shouldn't say this, Live in Hungaria isn't a live album, it's a studio album. It's just called Live in Hungaria. And then later on, to give you a sense of the irony that Aug's playing with here, he at this point, at a certain point, they go, well, we could play these songs live and record it. And so now they're like, well, we'll do Live in Hungaria live. So that's the direction we're going with the humor here, and it really is a lot of fun. So, um, and I just want to, just to embarrass.
You pointing that back out to me, just you pointing that back out to me, like saying it aloud, like and hearing it, I was like, that is really funny. I'm
Yeah,
really pleased with that. So yeah, thank you.
good. Well, that must be wonderful to have it reflected back at you and go, oh, I like this stuff. I'm going to buy this book. Um,
Yeah.
and it's not just, so we've got the humor. You're going to find things humorous about the book, but there's a little more than that going on as well. Like, I checked one passage. I'm just going to read very briefly, because I don't like when people read at me, but there are a few sentences. I just want to give people a sense of what else this book has. um, the sun beginning to sink below the horizon just as Becca, one of the band members, steps up to the mic. It is one of those magical associations you hope for both in music and life, when the disparate elements of beauty find their connecting puzzle pieces and embrace, however momentarily. So, I don't know anybody who will listen to this podcast, and certainly not the podcast person, who doesn't relate to that on some level. Yes, bands were fun. Yes, we had a lot of fun. Yes, there were crude jokes. Uh, every, ashtray floors, dirty clothes, and filthy jokes, as Paul Westerberg used to say. Um,
Nice.
and
Yeah.
and at the same time, there are these little transcendent moments where you go, yeah, that was really special. I have a few touchstones in my life that that I really remember as special moments, and that best time in your band is you know is really one of them for musicians like me and of a certain vintage. So I don't know. Would you like to talk at that at all? I've been talking a lot, so I'd like for you to chime in if you want.
Yeah, no, totally. They're the kind of moments that make it all worthwhile. Just that it's really hard to describe, but there's just this feeling you get that this sort of sensation where they're like you just kind of let go and actually feel for like a couple seconds that this is awesome. Getting to play music with people is awesome. Um, yeah.
Do you still find yourself in bands? Is the life always dragging you back in, or are you not doing that as so much anymore?
Totally. I thought I was done with music when I started doing Southpaw in 2019. It was just a question of time, really. Like I just really wanted to go full throttle with that. I tried to move out to LA in February of 2020 to, really make a go of it. And then when I got there, the world went a little crazy, and that wasn't possible anymore. So I kind of had to rethink my plans. But in early 2021, I used to play in a band in Boston called Lifestyle, which is Sean Drinkwater's project. He's in a band called Freeze Pop in Boston. synth pop band, doing quite well. But he, I mean, he's just. I think Sean's a genius. He just has a great ear for melody. He's very quick. Um, Great producer, engineer as well. He just sent me a text out of the blue one day, said, "Send me 20 demos." And I mean, because I thought I was done with music, I have like hundreds of song ideas on my phone and my computer, so it wasn't hard to like just pick 20 and send them over. And like a day and a half later, he sends me back 14 like songs. I mean, they needed a bit of tweaking, but they were kind of there. Um, and then we just kept like going back and forth for a while, and I wasn't thinking much of it, but I thought we should like record these as an album. You know, we had like a couple dozen um, songs to do, and I was like, as friends, we had never really written anything together before. I mean, we had never really written anything before, but as friends, it was a good thing to do. So I thought, you know, as just a symbol of our friendship, like making a record together, no matter what happens, would be fun. And then when we started recording, it just sounded awesome. Like we were just so surprised and excited at like um, how well it sounded. And we were just like super psyched to be doing it. So this whole past year, I've been driving up to Boston a couple times a month and recording. I mean, we've like set aside a lot of the earlier ones, and we just wrote like 11 new ones since the fall. We've got like around 30 something songs that we're
Wow.
trying to like figure out what to do with. Because yeah, we now like to actually get a band together and start playing, and like give them their proper due, because I think they're certainly among my best things I've ever done.
Right. And to be clear, what's your main instrument, or what are these demos that you're sending him? What instrument are you sending them, or instruments?
I'm a guitar player. I don't know how to technically play the piano, but I like to write a lot on the piano. I wouldn't want to play live. My technique, I don't consider myself a piano player, but I have written at least a few on piano, and those have come out really well. Yeah, but yeah, guitar mainly, and I play bass on the demos, so I always like playing bass.
Hmm. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I also continue to make music. I have a my cohort in Atlanta is a guy named Brett Hartley, and he's got a drummer down there with his friend Kevin Leahy, and we've been as a trio now for we're on a fourth record, um, and the idea I'm really interested in your friend reaching out to you and just getting musical ideas, because that's what we do too, and having the musical aspects. I sing and write the lyrics and all that, so having the music aspect taken care of, having somebody come in with passion and with ideas along those lines and saying, oh look, I've got 20 ideas or 10 ideas or 2 ideas, it's so easy to so much easier to plug that in and get out your pad of paper and wherever you've been keeping your lyric notes and start singing over it. So it's really interesting that's working for you as well.
Yeah, and I love collaborating. I mean, I write my own songs like completely too. I've got a bunch. I'd actually like to do a sort of solo record, but I enjoy working with other people and collaborating, because I mean, when you're writing words, a book, you're just on your own. And you got to kind of remember to go interact with other people, whereas music is like a much more social thing that I
Right.
really, that aspect of it I really love too.
Yeah, same here, same thing. It's I write, but I have a writers group, so I get other opinions. It's not like I'm entirely in a silo. um, so I'm always getting other opinions on my work, but still it's very much my thing, and it's the solitary thing. And
Mm.
if you want to participate in art in a community, if you want to participate with other folks, that's where the band comes back in. That's where and there's all those great associations. You're still kind of 18 on some level. You're still kind of
Oh yeah.
working your way through your instrument, and learning how to you're always relearning how to write songs, and you're cracking bad jokes and all that stuff. So very much
Hmm.
relate to that. And yet, as I read Buttery Cake Ass, I was struck by how often there would be more literate references that come up. In particular, you mentioned Ulysses. At one point, everybody in the band is reading Ulysses, which is to me amazing because I can't read Ulysses. Um, I'm like Mister. I get to page 150, and I'm just like, there's no point. I'm done. I'm getting zero from this at this point. As beautiful as it is, I'm not getting anything from it. Um, but everybody in the band is reading Ulysses at a certain point. There's also a lot of references I feel like to Homer in general, and I'm on a big Homer thing right now. We won't go into it, but can you talk a little bit toward how maybe kind of those more classical influences found their way into Buttery Cake Ass, or how it influences your writing in general?
Yeah, I Ulysses is, I mean, a big one, obviously. Um, it was weird. I was trying to think back to if I actually enjoyed reading Ulysses. I mean, it was something I felt I had to do, um, just something to get through. Uh, but when I checked my journals from when I was reading it back in 2007, I loved it. I mean, it was difficult and there was lots I didn't understand, but I really enjoyed it, especially like little details here and there. Um, what was I going to say? And I had read. I'm a big Anthony Burgess fan, so he's written a couple books about Joyce, and he has one called Rejoice, where he really spells out what's happening
Hmm.
in Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, which was great. I had read those ahead of time. And Bry, actually, I remember clearly. My friend who the book's dedicated to, going over his house one day when we were both back home from college, and he was taking a Joyce class, and he had me read the first page of Finnegan's Wake, and he was saying that each sentence can be read at least two different ways, and that idea really struck me. I really liked it, and I have one of my old bands called H Bird. I wrote a song called Sour Martinis, which is actually a chapter title in a James Bond book, but I tried, and I think most of the lines you can read them two different ways, which I liked a lot as a concept. But I'm trying to remember exactly why I chose Ulysses for the book. It was probably that connection with Bry. There's little references here and there. I'm not sure anyone would pick up on, but in the opening, I say Woodbee's Music is the name of their local record shop, and there's a line in Ulysses called Woodbee Music, which I liked a lot. I had written it down when while I was reading the book. I like any little phrase I liked. So it wasn't that I remembered that. I had a record of it. And Game of Signets was also a phrase. I forget where that is, but that's a Joyce one. And I thought I wrote that down as a possible song title for myself. And when I was doing all the fake discographies and everything, and their own songs they write, I checked all my song title lists to see if anything uh, was in there. Relics of Forgotten Futures was another one that I liked. But Game of Signets I really liked, and I liked that it was their swan song, like Swan Signet.
Hmm.
So tied that together.
Yeah, that's lovely. I like that a lot. And
Oh.
go on
Anything
Homer. Talk
anything to
all
do
day
with
on
Homer
Homer.
is completely coincidental. That's awesome that you picked up on stuff. It was not on purpose, but I mean, it was a quest. So I mean, and the Odyssey is, the seminal quest.
Right. Well, I'm in the middle of a 2+ year Homer project that I can't even talk about yet. It's just two.
Wow.
So, um, but it's kind of one of those things where, like, if you buy a certain brand of car and you've never considered that brand of car before, and then you go drive down the road and you see six of that brand of car and you've never once thought of it before. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's kind of like that. So now I walk around the world and I'm seeing Homer everywhere. Um, so yeah, but Joyce was always such a fascinating thing for me because you've got the Dubliners, which was, oh, I don't know if I want to call it, um, what I at this point post Joyce. They're really traditional kind of short stories. There's no confusion about what's going on. It's not supposed to be in any way opaque. It's clear what it is. And then you have Portrait of the Artist, which is fairly clear as well. And then he writes Ulysses, which becomes a complete artistic feat way off here in left field. And then instead of like coming back and going, okay, I was way over there, I can come back and write something that most narrative people can relate to. He says, no, I haven't gone far enough yet. I've got to write Finnegan's Wake now, which is absolutely beautiful and gorgeous and meticulous and frankly a little unreadable. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of like opening it up and go, I think I'll start on page one. You may as well start on page 67.
Yep.
It's my sense, and maybe I'm a little underdeveloped in the narrative sense, but um, I've always admired him as an artist because he clearly had this thing going on. It's like, no. I've got to do this thing. It's over here, and I hope, you know, I don't know, maybe it's sort of from my sort of more commercial growth of starting with Quiet Riot on to whatever. Um, it seems like, you should always kind of come back and go back to the basics and give people something that they can understand and get their teeth into. And he was, not like that at all. He was like, I'm going to take the marketing aspect and just go, nobody can understand me. So anyway, so yeah, well, I'm glad. I was glad to kind of find my way and find Joyce in the novel. And I always like those kind of classical references, and it's always good footing to have Homer, as kind of a foundation of the things you're doing.
Awesome.
So we have decided um, to self-publish this work. Um, you've self-published two other novels. Can you talk a little bit? People who are listening to this, some people will be interested just in the your journey to publication and the reasons you made the choices that you made, and I'm interested too. So I wondered if you might want to talk about your feelings about self-publication, how you've done it, and why you've made the decisions that you made.
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I had written two novels that never saw the light of day, and I won't self-publish them. They were me learning how to write, but I remember very much trying to have them published and just what an ordeal it was, and all the rejection. And the same thing happened with Off License to Kill. I'd written it as a screenplay after I had initially done it, and it got rejected by 50 publishers and agents. And then I tried the screenplay, and that didn't have any luck. Though in revamping it like that, I kind of learned a lot more and got more angles for the next revision. And then it became possible. I started seeing that you could just do ebooks, and I was like, I like that idea a lot, and I want it to be what I want it to be. Like, I had an agent uh, like the idea, and then well, the owner of a literary agency, and then she foisted it off onto one of the agents, and he liked the idea, but he wanted all these major changes that I did not agree with. And maybe I would have been published that way, but I did not care. Like, it wasn't even a question. I was just like, absolutely not. This is what the book is. It's supposed to be funny, and what you're saying is to make him, this character of James Vagabond, a more human, relatable character. That's not the intention at all. It's he's there for the jokes. I don't. That just seemed ridiculous to me. Um, and so, and doing it myself, it was cool. It was great to, I used Lulu for that the first time. Um, and to get the physical book back and be like, I did this. It was like a big sense of accomplishment. Um, for Nick Cave's Bar, the memoir, it was done at like the end of 2020. My best friend who I went on that quest with had passed away that summer, and it was sort of done. Well, it was done as a tribute to him and our friendship. And I guess I decided I could Kickstarter it, and get the money to. So I would be promoting it myself to get any promotional budget for me, and to also make up the copies. I started using Ingram. I was doing some research, and they seemed all right. And it was very much, I want to get this out now. My friend had just died a couple months before. This was all very fresh. It was very much a part of a healing process. Like, just I'd been telling the story live when he was still alive and right before the pandemic, and he actually came to the first show in Brooklyn. It was really nice. So while it was all still fresh, and like, I didn't want to deal with anybody else's input, I just wanted it out there. A friend of mine, Liz Ohanessian, is a writer, music writer out in Los Angeles, and I had her uh, not edit it, but like proofread it. I've made it clear that I didn't really want to make any structural changes or anything, but grammar or any sentence that doesn't seem comprehensible, please let me know, because I'm also grieving and I can't really tell, for everything. And then with Buttery Cake Ass, that Nick Cave's Bar did pretty well. Like, it's in record shops and bookstores all over the world. Um, cool independent shops. I spent a lot of time promoting it and being like, this is who I am. You might be interested in this. I write for these websites about music. And that was great. I love when people send me a picture of it in like a foreign country. That's so cool. And then Buttery Cake Ass was just such a ridiculous idea. I was like, nobody's going to be interested in this, like as a publisher, like as to go into some sort of financial venture with me. And it was like, and I don't want any changes. Like this is mine. This is exactly what I want it to be. Um, yeah, I mean, I edited a lot. It came a long way from its first draft, but everything in it is very important to me to have it be the way it is. And it was just like, I can kickstart it again and do it myself. And, Nick Cave's bar has been selling. I could probably, get it into those shops too. Um, there's no way I'm going to let anyone fuck with it. Can we swear? Anyone mess with this?
Right. No, that's fine. That's fine. No, um, it's such a great story, and I think people that's what they need to understand about self-publishing. As somebody who's going into his fourth round with it, you've been through three. There's a if you're the kind of artist that really needs to kind of keep it all a certain way, it's a beautiful way to go around, because I've done the same thing where I've sent the manuscript out and agents have said, what I really need is historical fiction, and I'm like, I mean, I took it as a compliment. I presume, they were saying, you can write, and why don't you write something I can sell, and that's great, but yeah, it's just, this is a novel about a bass player in 1995. I just, that's kind of what I'm doing,
Yeah.
um, and and it is beautiful to hang on to it. I know all kinds of horror stories about people going through um, cover issues, and to know that your book is going to come out and it's going to be a cover that you can at least stomach. You're the one who did it. You're the one who made the final yay or nay. So, and then obviously the actual words that are inside. Um, there's no sensitivity readers. Nobody's gonna stop and say, you know, we're not sure with the way that you're saying this, and it's like, no, I know how I'm saying it, and that's,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. So um, it's a beautiful thing, and I'm really glad that it's changed. When my first one was in self-published novel was in 2003, and there was just a lot of people going, oh no, you don't want to self-publish your novel, and I was like, yeah, I'm from rock and roll. That's what we do. We write a song, we make a CD, and we sit at this edge of this edge of the stage and sell them in the middle of the set. And you know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's there always needs to be that option that folks need to be able to just go, what, I'm just going to do it myself. And it's never been easier, and it's never been cheaper to do that. So anyway, that's my grandstanding for the night. So
Yeah. No, it's
all right. Well, I think I've gone through my 9 questions. I've got a check mark by every question. So we have
oh,
covered the gamut of everything that I wanted to talk about. Is there another tour coming up? If is there anything in the summer? Do you have any future plans to support the novel?
yeah. I did not want to come back. I just wanted to keep going. I was having such a blast. I mean, I was having a blast overall. I mean, it kind of was an emotional roller coaster of awesome to just completely emotionally devastated. Like when, one person shows up to the reading, you're just like, all right, we'll just hang out, I'm not going to give you a spiel for 40 minutes and then read my book to you. But then like the shows that people came to, it was fantastic. And then like in Louisville, like the owner of the shop, Brett Ralph, this shop called Surface Noise. I'd never met him, um, but he's like a Louisville figure I gathered from talking to people. And his shop is just kind of like his living room. It's like one of the nicest stores I've ever been in. Like carpeted, posters on the
Huh.
walls, books, records, and like art. And we were just hanging out, and like it was supposed to start at 7, and at 7:30, he looks up and he's like, "Where is everybody?" I was like, "Oh." And then like an hour later, this one guy shows up with a copy of Nick Cave's Bar, and he's like, "I was reading this last night. I want to get another for my friend." And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." We hung out for like an hour, and like, I was really kind of bummed. This was the second night of the tour, and the first night had gone so well. But then I started thinking about it. I was like, I've never been in this city before. I'm at least 1,000 miles from where I live, and somebody was reading my book last night and came to, get another one. That's so freaking cool. Um, so yeah, I've got the bug. I'm doing the Connecticut show this Saturday, and then Boston the following week. I've got to run down to DC again in April. I really want to do a run out to Chicago, kind of hit Columbus, Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. People have invited me out there. I just got to put it all together. I'd love to keep doing it in the summer. I mean, as you said, this will be out in June. I'm trying to get out to LA. I would love to hit the West Coast. There's a place in Seattle where it's selling that I would really like to go to. And LA, John Andrew Fredrick, who I mentioned before, he and I have been talking about doing a reading together. I think that would be really fun. So yeah, I mean, I am open to coming anywhere if I can do it for the rest of the year.
Excellent. Well, I'm in Portland, so if you make it to Portland, I want to know about it. Actually, I'll be following you, so I will know about it either way.
Awesome.
But
I would love to
for
meet you.
everybody else out there, yes, lots of places, lots of record stores. The novel is called Buttery, The Ballad of Buttery Cake Ass. It's by Aug Stone. I'm guessing, Aug, you can get this anywhere?
Anywhere. Yep.
Excellent. So look for it. It's funny. You'll enjoy it. And Aug, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. And good